Hi, Stuart Talley here. Here to do another update on the Pinnacle metal-on-metal trial that's currently ongoing right now in Dallas, Texas. Today we had some leftover testimony from Dr. Tony Nargol. From my last update, you may recall Dr. Nargol is a surgeon in Leeds, England, who was involved in sort of the early efforts to use metal-on-metal hips. He was a big proponent of Pinnacle metal-on-metal hips, as well as another DePuy product called the ASR, which was subsequently recalled. Dr. Nargol was one of the first people to sort of alert DePuy to the problems with these hips, and that was back in 2008, 2009. And DePuy kept telling him that he was the problem, that he was an outlier, that they didn't understand why he was having so many problems with these hips. And in essence, they were blaming him for poor surgical technique. Now, one of the things that Dr. Nargol talked about today that was very interesting had to do with the Joint Registry. Now, in England and in some other countries, the government actually buys all the prosthetic hips that are put in that country. And so they have laws that require every surgeon to enter into a database information about every hip that they install and every time they have to revise the hip. And the government can actually look at that data and create reports and find out which hips work best, which hips are problem hips and shouldn't be used. Now, what he described with the National Joint Registry in England was very interesting. The individuals who put together this registry, every year there's a report that comes out. There's a board of editors that help analyze the data and put out this report. What was very interesting is that somebody from DePuy, a DePuy executive, was actually on this board for the Joint Registry in England. And one of the things that DePuy spoke about at the beginning of the case was how well their Pinnacle hip did on the Joint Registry in England. And Dr. Nargol really explained why it did well. And the reason it did well is that the Pinnacle actually has 3 different kinds of inserts that can go into the cup. So not all Pinnacle hips are metal-on-metal hips. Some are metal on plastic, some are metal on ceramic. Now, when they did these registries and they kept track of the Pinnacle hip and the performance of that hip, they didn't differentiate by the type of bearing surface. So the metal on metals got lumped in with the metal on plastics, which was the vast majority of Pinnacle hips that were put in people. So the data showing the revision rate for the Pinnacle was not really accurate and didn't really tell you anything about how the metal-on-metal Pinnacles were doing. So the data that DePuy was pointing to at the beginning of the trial in their opening statements really doesn't tell the whole picture and is misleading in many respects. And Dr. Nargol talked about that. It wasn't until 2013 that they actually broke out the different kinds of Pinnacle hips in their reporting. And when they did that, what it showed was that the Pinnacle metal-on-metal was terrible. It was 8 times more likely to fail than the metal on plastic. And the data that was showing up in the registry showing such a low revision rate was because the metal on plastic was bringing the average way down. Now, the other witness we heard from is Dr. Thomas Schmalzried. Dr. Thomas Schmalzried is an orthopedic surgeon in Los Angeles. He is what they call the inventor or a member of the design team for the Pinnacle and for another metal-on-metal hip called the DePuy ASR. He was a big proponent of metal-on-metal hips. He is one of these surgeons that travels around the country, speaks at meetings, talks about new designs of different kinds of hips, and he was an employee, or not an employee, but a consultant for DePuy. And the way he was paid was he received a royalty on every Pinnacle and ASR that was put in somebody. Unfortunately, Dr. Schmalzried didn't disclose this royalty interest when he would speak in front of surgeons. and there was some testimony about that. Dr. Schmalzried made millions of dollars on the Pinnacle and ASR. At trial, the number that was discussed was $24 million is how much he's made on these hips. And all the work that he's done for DePuy with respect to these hips, as well as the litigation work that he's done. So even after the ASR was recalled, after the Pinnacle was taken off the market, he's made a lot of money just being involved in these lawsuits. So there was a lot of discussion about that. There was also discussion about Dr. Schmalzried insisted that he was just a design surgeon, that he just helped design these hips. And the plaintiff's attorney really wanted to get him to admit that he was involved in the marketing of these hips, not just the design. He was really a marketing person. And he wouldn't admit it. So he went through document after document, email after email, where Dr. Schmalzried was having very detailed discussions with the marketing people at DePuy on how to sell more hips, what to tell the doctors, what kinds of sound bites doctors should have. He was involved in the marketing and the promotional materials that went to actual patients and helped draft that stuff. The one thing that got a lot of attention during his testimony was a huge speech that he gave before all of the DePuy salesmen. They have a big meeting once a year. He was on the stage and he presented this big presentation about Pinnacle and about ASR hips. And it was really designed to tell the salesmen how they can sell more, what they needed to do to sell more, what they needed to do if someone questioned the hips, questioned them about the problems with these hips, sort of responses that the salesman can give to doctors. And there was a lot of discussion about that. Now, today was, I think, the theme of the day, which has been the theme throughout this trial, is that DePuy was more concerned about making money than it was about the safety of their patients. Another theme is that this new design, this Pinnacle metal on metal, and all the metal on metal hips were really put forth not to help patients, not because people thought they would be better, but because people thought they would make more money with these hips. And they could sell them as being better. And so that's the theme that's been coming out throughout this trial. Throughout the day, there's also been testimony from plaintiffs, from plaintiffs' doctors, about how the revision surgery has impacted their life. And for some of the plaintiffs, it's been dramatic. So there's been some very powerful testimony about how the problems with these hips have really impacted the plaintiff's life. I think this has been a good day for the plaintiffs again. If you have any questions about the trial, any questions about a hip that you may have, feel free to give us a call. You can reach us at the phone number on the screen, or you can fill out one of our online forms and we'll get back to you right away.